It's impossible for there to be scientific evidence of God. Welcome to Chasing Smoke. Science is the gold standard for human understanding. While evidence might be anything that makes a person believe a claim, if you want other people to take that claim seriously, it's gotta go through science. And there's a very good reason for that. Science is based on empirical evidence and logical reasoning, and it's used to make predictions about the world that can be consistently tested and verified. Theists like to think their idea of God helps to explain the universe. In fact, many theists think that it's possible for us to have scientific evidence for God, or maybe even that we've found evidence of God already. It would be great if we could find some evidence of God to scientifically study. The problem is, the only kind of evidence that science can deal with is objective, testable, physical evidence. And when it comes to God, that kind of evidence is impossible. The concept of God is by its very nature one that cannot be supported by physical evidence. Consider the traditional characteristics of God: omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, omnibenevolence. In order to test whether another being knew everything or had omniscience, you would need to know everything. In order to test whether another being was everywhere at once, you would need to be everywhere at once. No human is capable of testing these traits or even identifying them, so we see there's no possible way to recognize if another being truly has these types of characteristics. You would just have to take that being's word for it. And that means there's no scientific way to confirm these characteristics are present in a being, or for that matter, that it's even possible for them to be. If we want physical evidence for God, we need to look elsewhere. Now, how one defines God determines what physical evidence would indicate it. If you define God as being undetectable, you are defining God as something that doesn't leave evidence. Evidence of God is therefore impossible, QED. But if we imagine a being we somehow can detect, and imagine we observe evidence of that being, where would we be? Well, it depends a lot on what the definition was and what we detected. But at that point, we could begin scientifically studying this being, which we now have evidence for. We could test it, determine its qualities, discover our limit of knowledge about it. We can have facts. That is what having physical evidence of something means. However, that being would immediately come under suspicion of not being the real God, because the real God is, according to apologists for the last few centuries, supposed to be immeasurable, immaterial, and undetectable. So, if we have real testable evidence of something that is suspected of being God, some theists will immediately declare it is not God, but rather something merely similar to God, or something pretending to be God. And they would have a good point. After all, we can't be sure that God is the only being capable of performing miracles by manipulating space-time, or at least doing something that looks that way to us. How could we ever have confidence that we had identified the real God and not something pretending to be God, or something that just appears similar enough to our idea of God that we misidentify it? If we have an observation or an experience which makes us suspect some reality-altering event has occurred, the explanation is much more likely to be mental illness, hallucinations, illusions, hoaxes, technology far beyond our understanding, or even just natural events which we simply can't explain. Regardless of what is observed, any of these explanations is going to be more likely to be true than the laws of physics were violated via a miracle. We don't know how to identify a miracle. We don't even know how to define a miracle. Is a miracle something that defies the laws of physics? We would have to fully understand all the laws of physics in order to determine that our observation could not be explained by them. That godlike level of understanding of physics is far beyond our reach, so it would be impossible to ever declare anything as a miracle. We might observe something we currently cannot explain, even something that appears to break the laws of physics, but that means we need to understand the laws of physics better, not that something magical or supernatural has occurred. Now, what if we define God as just the first ever thing, the first thing to exist? That doesn't really help. It's impossible to identify the first ever thing. There will always be the possibility that something, even another being, could be more fundamental or have existed even before the earliest thing you have identified. We would not be justified in declaring this absolutely the most fundamental thing or the earliest thing. It would just be the earliest thing we had yet detected. So, what if we define God as the thing that created the universe? The universe is physically real, and we have evidence of it, but we have no evidence for anything before it or outside of it. If the origin or cause of the universe is or was outside the universe, it's probably impossible for us to ever detect it. But suppose that somehow we detect or observe a being that created the universe. All that would really mean is that we would have a new thing, this creator being, that would be physically real, but beyond our ability to fully explain, just like the universe is now. For all we could know, the being that created our universe might exist in a universe of their own, and they might wonder how that universe came to be, just like we do. We have already, in a sense, identified something that created the universe, the Big Bang. But theists are not satisfied. The Big Bang has no personality. It can't love us, forgive us, or reassure us that our biases are justified. Theists want there to be something behind the scenes that hasn't been detected, that science can't address, that can't be tested. Because as long as we can't test anything about God, no theist has to admit their theistic beliefs are wrong. And that is ultimately what theism is about. It's not about finding God. It's about belief in what can't be found. And it's not about explaining or understanding the universe. It's about making us feel better about it.